Hello, my name is Kiriath, and today we are going to have a little chat about the age-old question of why does Chaos just get everything that the Imperium gets? Because there's been a resurgence of that question, because we've had the little preview thing for Knights, Chaos Knights, and of course the Traitor Commissar and Oghren. Bulgrin? Oghren. Either way, same dude, different weapons, really. They're going to be up for pre-order soon. They're going to be available in not that long. I think it would probably be this weekend that's going to come up. I think probably the 6th. Kind of exciting, not going to lie. Having to resist the urge to grab a Chaos Knight because the kit just looks absolutely amazing. I love the way that thing looks. It's fantastic. However, back on topic, the actual statement, the question, why does Chaos get everything the Imperium gets? There's a couple of layers to this, so we're going to talk about both. The first layer is the incredibly simple answer that I think actually really everyone knows, but we're going to cover it anyway, which is that Chaos get everything that the Imperium gets because that's kind of the point in many ways. It's part of the very foundation of the Warhammer 40,000 universe. The events of the Horus Heresy has led up to where we are now, and you could well argue that the Horus Heresy is the prime and most outstanding example of Chaos getting what the Imperium gets, because they got half the legions and half the Primarchs, and everything just went kind of bad wrong from there. And it is essentially what Chaos does. Chaos is insidious, it is relentless, it is unavoidable, it comes after you all the time, and whatever you have at some point, especially when it comes to the Imperium, someone's going to take it to Chaos sooner or later. That's just how things work. That's the way Chaos operates. That is the way that Chaos functions in this universe, and as such, anything that the Imperium has at some point will probably end up being used for nefarious purposes by Chaos to some degree. Now, of course, the thing is that that's actually not true on the tabletop. That's one of the first things to remember. There was a point, I think, maybe not even that long ago, where it probably felt more like Chaos just gets everything that the Imperium gets, because there was a lot of overlap between the Chaos Space Marine range and the Space Marine range. I would argue that that has changed significantly over the years. I don't think it's really the case anymore, and I would have suggested that it's not really the case anymore even before the introduction of all the Primaris stuff, which of course Chaos does not have access to in any capacity at all. If you actually look at the difference in range between Chaos Space Marines and Space Marines, there's a bunch of stuff Space Marines have access to that Chaos do not. Some of it doesn't make a huge amount of sense, don't get me wrong, but still. And Chaos, of course, has access to stuff that Space Marines do not. They have the added benefit of not just essentially taking from the Imperium, but being able to actually create stuff of their own as well. As the examples being the Forge Fiend, the Mauler Fiend, the Hell Brute, sort of technically Hell Brute, and the Hell Drake, and God knows what else. They've got a significant chunk of their own shit going on. They don't have to just pillage and steal and hope that their Predator remains in pristine condition, because they have like demon engines and stuff, defilers, they have stuff that Space Marines don't have access to. Likewise, Space Marines have got things that they don't have access to, especially when you look at the separate codex chapters, like the Blood Angels, Dark Angels, Space Wolves. They have weapons and vehicles that Chaos has never had, and most likely never ever will. Things like the Dark Talon, you've got the flying shoebox the Space Wolves have got. I can never remember the name of it. The Storm Wolf, probably. I'm sure it's got wolf in the name somewhere. That's probably it. Look, the naming conventions for the Space Wolf stuff, call it the Wing Wolf, and you're probably halfway there, regardless of what it's actually called, which I can never remember to begin with. So, I don't know if it's really so much the case anymore. It probably sometimes feels like it, because we have instances like this, where, we had the Imperial Knights, and of course the first thing that a lot of people did was go, now how do I make these traitor? Which is a good question, it's a valid question, a question that should always be explored, but now there is of course an official version of at least one of the Knight chassis for the Chaos lovers out there. And when things like that happen, it does undeniably feel like it's just Chaos getting what Imperium got. Again, it's always Chaos getting what the Imperium's got every single time, regardless of whether that's actually true or not, which I think at this point, I would suggest it's not true more than it is, if that makes sense. I mean, look at the new Chaos stuff with the Master of Possessions, the Lord Discordant, we've got the new Obliterators, and Space Marines now have all the Primaris shit, which Chaos, for now, doesn't have access to. God knows what's going to happen in the future. But, for the moment, there is an entire side of the Space Marine range which is just flat out not available to Chaos, and I think probably won't be for the foreseeable future. It would make sense for Primaris to fall at some point, but I suspect that range will be shored up considerably, and we'll start to see the phasing out of standard Space Marines before we actually start to see the fall of Primaris to Chaos. I think otherwise it would become a bit messy, and Games Workshop seem to be trying to avoid messy with the way that they've introduced the Primaris and the way that Primaris are slowly overtaking, much so a lot of people would prefer that's not the case. So, when it comes to that question, lore-wise, really, Chaos should get everything the Imperium gets. I mean, due to the way Chaos works, even the idea of Space Wolves and Dark Angels and Blood Angels having their own individual bits of war gear, their own vehicles, their own weapons, you would think at some point at least one of them would turn and take with them their flying shoebox. They would take with them their aircraft with the shrine of whatever stuck on the back of it. They would, they would take with them a Baal Predator, perhaps. But we don't have those options on the tabletop. And in fact, I don't think we've ever had those options on the tabletop unless I've missed something significant that went down. It's a weird thing because it feels like it's true, but I don't think it is. And it also feels like it's true, and yet it can't be true because otherwise the tabletop side of things would become too homogenized. It would become just too samey. I mean, having said that, we are also missing significant chunks of what Chaos actually do have. Regardless of whether we feel like Chaos gets everything that the Imperium gets, we are missing significant chunks of what Chaos actually has, which would only serve to make that statement more true were it not the case that they don't have things like Dark Mechanicus. We don't have Traitor Guard. Now, of course, those are two sizable factions for Chaos. Those are two very good examples of Chaos getting what the Imperium gets, except they don't exist on the tabletop. Yes, we did have Renegades and Heretics. We did have that for a while. But we don't really have that now. That model line has been discontinued by Forge World, sadly, and there is no real replacement for it in terms of what Games Workshop are making. There's no codex for that. There may be at some point, in fact I'd be surprised if there wasn't, given that we now have from Blackstone Fortress actual Traitor Guard. We now have commands for Traitor Guard. We've got, elements of Dark Mechanicus stuff in there. But for now, those are two significant chunks of Chaos that are directly taken from the Imperium that simply aren't available on the tabletop at all. Now, because when those do arrive, if those do arrive, I won't say when, I just want to cover my bases. I'm pretty sure it'll happen at some point, but given that some point could be like 5 years down the line, let's say if, not when. If either of those do arrive, the question will most likely arise again. Why is the Imperium just getting what the Chaos gets? But again, I think there's also something to be said for the... maybe not even the difference in war gear, but the difference in flavour. There is an element of, of copy-paste in a way. I mean, Chaos Space Marines are still using bolters. They're still using las cannons. They're still using heavy bolters and heavy flamers. They're still using the gear that Space Marines use. And to be totally honest, when we look at it, Chaos Space Marines and Tactical Squads, they fulfill exactly the same function. They do exactly the same thing. But that's because they come from the same source. That doesn't necessarily mean that they are identical. They perform the same roles using the same weapons. But they perform those roles in different contexts, or at least in terms of different moral standings, let's put it that way. It's the same with Traitor Guard and Dark Mechanicus. I mean, to be honest, we can probably push Dark Mechanicus to the side in terms of the idea of it just being an Imperium thing that Chaos gets, because the Dark Mechanicus are, of course, far more adventurous than their loyalist counterparts. They are prepared to faff around with demon engines. They are absolutely prepared to be all like proper tech heretic and, you know, create things new. They are prepared to push the boundaries of what you can do by combining the soul of a demon with some poor sod's power sword, whether he knows about it or not. They are somewhat separated from the argument, I think, just because they do have the potential to be so different, to be so out there, and so, well, just so much more capable of invention than the Adeptus Mechanicus is. Traitor Guard is where that particular question becomes the most interesting, because Traitor Guard would essentially operate the same way, I'm pretty sure. They would have similar tactics, they would use the same weapons, they would wage war the same way. I mean, they are constrained, of course, by the training they received while loyal, and with the war gear that they have access to. If that particular army was an armoured company, then they will probably perform very much the same way that a loyalist armoured company would perform, which could be used as a great example of Chaos just getting what the Imperium gets. But in terms of personality and in terms of motivation, in terms of actual substance, they're still not really the same thing, because they don't interact the same way. They don't fight for the same thing, which actually creates a much larger separation than I think is often given credit for. It's the same thing with the Imperial Knights. It's like, it is very easy to look at that and go, well, it's just a copy and paste from one to the other, they're just taking it and putting spikes on it, and really what makes it different? Well, what makes it different is what you do with it. What makes it different is what they fight for. What makes it different is the fact that they have taken what should be essentially lifelong knightly vows, spat all over them, and are then perfectly happy killing the people that they were once supposed to protect. It might be a case of Chaos is getting it, but that also simplifies it down quite a lot as well, because it's not just Chaos getting the thing the Imperium got, it's also Chaos corrupting the thing the Imperium had. It's Chaos changing it, making it, I think, arguably more evil. I think that's a fair thing to say. And that's kind of more the way to think about it, I think, than anything else. It's a question that comes up whenever there is crossover between something that the Imperium has access to that Chaos then gets access to. It's something that I think is very easy to trot out whenever there's like just that moment where you're used to this being only available to this faction, and then suddenly it's available to the other one as well. But it kind of ignores a whole slew of things. It ignores the very basis of what Chaos does to the Imperium. It ignores the I was going to say hundreds, I don't think it's hundreds, but the significant number of examples whereby Chaos are absolutely not getting access to what the Imperium has got, Primaris being the key comparison at this stage anyway. And it's also ignoring the fact that it's not just a case of Chaos getting the thing, it's a case of Chaos actively corrupting the thing, getting inside it, making it different to what it once was. And even if it's not massively different on the tabletop, in terms of the way you approach it, in terms of the way you treat it, it is different, because they are fighting on two different separate sides with different separate intentions. And that to me is something that I think probably shouldn't be ignored all that much, because it is a key part of how the narrative of any army works, and it kind of reinforces the fact that, yeah, that's what Chaos do. That's the whole point of what Chaos is in this universe. It is a constant, corrupting, irremovable presence that keeps the Imperium from essentially becoming anything close to actually successful, and instead leaves it a stagnant, crumbling empire that props itself up in one place whilst falling down another in an endless cycle of essentially training people up, creating new chapters of Space Marines, creating new pieces of war gear, only to find those very same people fighting against it in like a year or 2 years or 10 years' time. It's just what the story is. But the thing is, it's just not that bad on the tabletop. It could be way worse, and it's not represented nearly as much as it actually takes place in the lore itself. So yeah, again, rambly as anything, but that is a question that's cropped up a few times. That's something I've seen a few people say with the stuff about the Chaos Knights coming up for pre-order and the Traitor Command coming up for pre-order. I've seen it on a couple of the videos that I've made. I've seen it on Twitter and on Facebook and a few other places. So I thought, why not ramble about it a bit? Let me know what you think of all of that in the comments. Do you reckon it is actually a true statement anymore? Do you think it hasn't been true for quite some time? Do you think it still is true, that it is just, a thing of, they just get what the Imperium gets because that's the point? Or do you think it's not nearly as bad as it can sometimes appear when we have examples like the Knights shifting sides and getting their own codex and kits and stuff? Let me know what you think in the comments down below. Feel free to click any of the things. There's videos and subscribe and Patreon and all that shit. There's also a link in the description to Element Games. My brain has stopped working. What has happened? To Element Games. It's an affiliate link where if you click it and you buy stuff, I get a little something as well, but you don't get charged anything extra. It's a great alternative to Patreon if you don't want to do the Patreon thing, which, is totally up to you. But it's like you'd save money on what you'd be paying anyway. So, yeah, it's there if you want to use it. You don't have to. It's entirely up to you. Do what you like. Thank you very much for watching. I will see you for the next one. Toodaloo.